guys, and welcome to our monthly Q&A. Thanks for joining me again. We're going to address our first issue, our first question, which is always, how's the market doing? So the feeling that I'm getting is that obviously the market is still strong, and we're still seeing high prices and multiple offers, but I kind of feeling that there's a little shift coming along. And the reason I say that is because, with the whole COVID mortgage relief forbearance plans, over 7.25 million households have taken advantage of that mortgage relief plan or mortgage forbearance plan. And 2 million households are still in forbearance, but they're basically coming to the last leg of this forbearance program. And in the next few months, we're going to have banks reassessing these plans, and we're going to see a lot of people either need to start paying their mortgages, selling their houses, or going into foreclosure. Now, the banks are really prepared for that, and they're going to be offering different types of loan modifications, maybe lower interest rates, to help keep as many homeowners in the homeowner's position as possible, so that they aren't overwhelmed with a lot of inventory as we saw before. And so I think we have a different type of situation. I do not think we're going to see a whole slew of foreclosures as we did before, but I do have a feeling we're going to see a little bit more inventory once people are either forced to sell their houses or start paying their mortgage. And so I think that come September, we're going to see a little bit of more of an inventory coming in, and that will get absorbed rather quickly. But the more inventory that comes in, and it might be absorbed quickly at first, we will kind of see maybe sort of a leveling out of inventory and supply and demand, as where right now we have really, really high demand but very low supply. The second question I have is, how long do I have to back out of a transaction? So this really depends on what you negotiate during the escrow process. So it all depends on how long your contingencies are. So I think I've mentioned this before, there are 3 main contingencies, and so long as you have your first contingency, which is the inspection one, still in, you can basically back out for any which reason you'd like. So even if you have a change of heart, or something comes up in an inspection, or you discover something about the neighborhood, you can basically back out during that first contingency period. But what happens if the time goes by and you remove all of your contingencies and then you have a change of heart? At that point, your deposit becomes at risk. Now, does that mean that the seller automatically gets your deposit? No, it's a little bit more of a lengthy process, but they do have a claim to your deposit. And so getting your deposit, you would probably have to advise with an attorney and see if there really is an out or some sort of loophole that you can use to at least get back your deposit partially. Recently, I've had a really unique situation where I still had our loan contingency in, and actually this has happened to me once in the past, where we still had our loan contingency in, but because we were so far in the process and the loan was already approved, when the buyer decided to back out, he couldn't lien on his loan contingency because the sellers already knew that the loan was completely approved, the docs were already in escrow. And so at that point, even if you have your contingency in, but your contingency is something that can be proved, that is, that you can prove that the loan actually happened, and that's your only contingency, at that point it becomes very tricky. And then, like I said, your deposit becomes at risk. So if you're having doubts at all, it's best to really, really take into consideration those doubts at the beginning part, where you still have your inspection contingency, and not later on when you have a loan or an appraisal contingency, because at that point you can always prove that the appraisal did appraise and that the loan did go through. The best thing to do to save the seller, to be considerate of the sellers, to save yourself the deposit, to be considerate of the agents and the time of everyone involved, is to really take into consideration the process before you go into it. The third question is, how long does it typically take to sell a house in this market? So it obviously depends what market you're in, but here in LA, we have a very hot market, and most houses sell within the first few weeks being on the market, if they're priced right. With that being said, if the house is sitting on the market for 3 or 4 weeks, that's an indication to the sellers that maybe they need to reconvene with their agent and revisit the price. Because if the house hasn't sold in 3 weeks in this market, you're probably not going to get what you're asking for it. Because most houses that sell within the first week either sell at asking or over asking. And that's pretty typical. And buyers who see houses sitting on the market for 3, 4, 5 weeks already know that, hey, in this market, because so many things are selling so quickly and so many buyers are jumping on it, that probably means that this house isn't worth it, because if it was, it would have already sold. So I know a lot of sellers really want to overprice properties right now simply because they know that the market is hot. But the way that I always try to look at it is price right the first time, and that'll save you the hassle of wasting your time on the market, and also of then having to price adjust. And basically when you do that, you kind of send an indication to the buyers. Sellers are a little bit more desperate. There's more room for negotiation. Whereas if you price right from the get-go and you get multiple offers, the power is more in the seller's hands, and they need to negotiate less. And that even carries into the transaction when the request for repairs come along, and obviously the seller's trying to give as little as possible and the buyers want as much as possible. If there's a backup offer, or if the buyer knows that the house is in such high demand, they might be willing to agree to less of a request for repairs, as opposed to if they know that there's nothing else in the backup position, they can really be more adamant about what they're demanding from their request for repairs. So price right. Obviously you don't want to price too low, because then you end up with multiple offers, and it becomes very, very messy, and it becomes a headache for everyone involved. You want to get a few good offers, but you don't need 25 offers. If you get 3, 4, 5 offers, that should do the trick. So thanks again. Really appreciate you for submitting your questions, and I'll see you guys next month.